It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of #Event Icons, presented by Endless Events, the show where you get to ask the icons of the events industry anything. So, you might be wondering, how do you get to ask questions? All you have to do is use the question panel on the right of GoToWebinar to submit your questions. Or you can hop on Twitter to submit your questions with the #Event Icons. We'll be answering your questions live during the entire show. Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better conversation we can have. So please help share #Event Icons on Twitter and Facebook. Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com. Now, without any further delay, this is #Event Icons with your hosts, Will Curran of Endless Events, Laura Lopez of Social Tables, and Brant Kruger of Event Technology Consulting.
Oh, yeah. Welcome back, everyone, to #Event Icons. I am Will Curran. Brant and Laura are out on assignment, rocking some more events. You know how it is. So you guys are just stuck with me, but the good news is I've brought an amazing panel with me to be discussing a very, very interesting topic that definitely I think affects me in Arizona a lot, which where I had to bring in some amazing local guests as well into this one. But we're talking how to bring some local flair into your event. And, you know, when you're planning a conference, a lot of times you're bringing in a big group and they may not have ever been to the city or the state even, or sometimes even the country that you are hosting the event in. So we're talking a little bit about strategies to making your flair a little bit less sucky, we'll say. I'm joined by an amazing panel. As I said, I am joined first and foremost by Andy Acs. Andy is one of the co-founders of TripScout, which we'll talk about what TripScout is, but it's an amazing app for getting people a good feel for what a city can truly bring. Thank you so much for joining us, Andy.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Awesome. And next up is a good friend of mine, and I am so lucky to have her on this show. She also sits on the ILEA Arizona board with me. Tressa Rini from Hello Destination Management, the Arizona, I guess you would say Arizona Division. Office. There we go. That's probably a lot better of a word. But she is absolutely an expert. She has planned so many events here in Arizona, and we were recently talking about how far too often people bring cowboy hats into Arizona, even though no one really wears cowboys hats here unless you're like in Cape Creek. So Tressa's joined by me to talk a little bit more about how she does it with her events. So thank you so much for joining us, Tressa.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right, and last but not least, we had to get an awesome CVB involved in this event because we really had to get the person who leads a lot of times, bringing the person to that city. Right, you're looking out for an event, and these CVBs are saying, "You come to our city, come to our city, come to our city," and so we had to get one here to talk about how you can utilize the CVB also to bring some local flair. I am joined by Erin Icenhour, from the Charlotte CVB. Thank you so for joining us, Erin.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so I don't want to delay anymore because I think we're about to take the boxing gloves off and talk a little bit deeper about this. And these guys don't know how to not hold back. They were grilling me before the show even started, so I want to jump right on in and introduce each of these amazing people. So let's start off with Andy. So Andy, you're not traditionally from the events industry, but I still want to hear the story of how TripScout got started. So can you tell us a little bit about how did TripScout get started? How did you get involved in this travel industry world? Oh, Andy, you might be muted.
Sorry. So the way that I got involved in TripScout was actually I was in the event industry very temporarily, and I left it. So I was working for a startup called Treater that was out here in Washington, D.C., and we were very, very lucky to be acquired by the awesome company Wedding Wire. So I got engaged 3 weeks before. Actually, fun fact, today is my 3-year wedding anniversary. And so I got involved in the event industry, and I helped run a portion of their business called EventWire. So I was making products for individuals that were planning their events and figuring out how to go link them up with caterers, venues, all that great stuff. My big passion in life was always travel. And I was always kind of a startup geek, and I loved my time at Wedding Wire, but wanted to go sink my teeth into something on the tech side that I really loved. So I joined forces with a great friend of mine named Konrad Walashevsky. And we started TripScout, and it was the frustration of like never having the right tool to go explore a new city, sort of on your own and find the local spots and be able to go get off the beaten path. So we started that around 2 years ago and going strong today.
That's awesome. And for those who don't know what TripScout is, how does this differentiate itself from, like a Yelp or a TripAdvisor? And how does, does it take this person on a journey? Because that's what really it's all about.
Yeah, so it's a great question. The big thing that we're trying to do differently is trying to no longer, need 5 or 10 hours to go and look through every single restaurant in a city. What we do is we partner with local experts and travelers alike, and we try to come up with here are the true best things to go do in that city, both on and off the beaten path. So I always have this moment of like you're standing on a corner and you're looking at Yelp and you're like, I want sushi, but there's 8 sushi places and they all look equally good. We've removed a lot of that noise and we just say, here are the best things to do. And we cover neighborhoods all throughout the cities, trying to find like the great iconic things that every city has. But we also want to go bring you into neighborhoods and have you feel real local life.
Awesome. I love the curated experience because, like you said, like sometimes there's so much noise when you're trying to figure out what to do, and there's 4,000 listings of travel guides and things like that. Really, giving you something a little bit more laser focus is awesome. And Andy, just so everyone, this is one of my favorite questions. If you weren't going to be doing this, and you weren't in the events industry, and you weren't doing TripScout, what do you think you would be doing instead?
Oh, that's super easy. So actually, the first job I ever had was the front desk at the Hampton Inn in College Park, Maryland. A nice but not very nice hotel. And I got to work at the age of like 16 as front desk, and I saw everything that you can imagine in that hotel. And it was a fun problem-solving job, and I think it kind of set up sort of my love for service. But if I could go back, I would probably go back to just being like the guy on the desk again.
Awesome. I love it. So a little bit less direction, just like take orders, do things. I love it. I love it. I think I would take that too, being a business owner, like not having to think for myself for a little while. That'd be awesome.
Well, I worked in bad hotels. So I worked in bad hotels where I was the only person and it was just one fire to the next. And at 16, it was kind of fun to have that much responsibility.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. All right, Tressa, we got to hear this story because I think your story is awesome. Can you tell everyone a little bit what got you in the events industry and doing what you're doing today?
So in college, I was majoring in history with a minor in art history, like a super practical degree. And I thought that I wanted to do museum curation because I loved art. I loved the installation, the feeling of it. And then I got an internship and I realized that I did not want to be an art curator when I grew up. And I kind of finished my degree out, but it was back to the drawing board afterwards. And I knew that in college I loved planning the events. Like I sat on boards and was in clubs and committees, and I was always like, oh, I'll do the event part. Like I'll handle that. And it was my favorite. And so then I was like, oh, that must be a job. Like, I feel like I see TV shows like Oprah has, like Colin Cowie, like these are real things. And so I started looking and I got a call back from Hello and I had a first interview and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the job I want. Like, this is what I want to do. It was specifically for event designing, which is my favorite part of it. And then I was like, this is amazing. I'm so glad that I got this opportunity. Like, I'm not going to get this job. Like, this is too amazing of a gig. And then I got a second interview and I had to do proposals. I went all into it. I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. This is such a fun experience. Again, I'm not going to get this job. So when I got the job, I was like, oh my gosh, how did I get my dream job out of like not knowing that this even existed? And so it's really been the best. And it's really interesting, though, now doing it. It's kind of drawing a parallel between, oh, no, I was on the right track with curation, because sometimes event designing, it's like you said, with the TripScout, like curating, getting rid of the noise, getting down to what it is and putting it in there, because there's beautiful, brilliant ideas everywhere, but kind of like bringing that together for your guest, for the space, for your location. So that's what I do, and that's how I got here.
That's awesome. And like a destination management company very much is like a curator, right? So can you tell a little bit about like what are you doing on a day-to-day basis, and how are you curating these local experiences for your clients?
So as an office and as a company, we handle everything from their transportation, tours and activities. We basically do everything minus their hotel stay and their food and beverage at the hotel. And so everybody else does all those things, like the buses and the Hummer tours and all those fun things. And I just get to focus on the designing their themed events and or enhancing any of those tours and activities with like a creative element to give them a little bit more of that, like that curated, this luxury experience, this specially tailored experience. So we do all of that, and we plan all of their, we help source for them all the right parts and pieces that bring the destination and anything that they're looking for. And like, it doesn't have to be destination specific. Like, oh, I want a sequin linen that has a zebra running through a forest on it. That's what we go do. And so, I mean, we try to steer them away from the zebra forest
Please
linen, but but that's what we're here to do, is just to deliver all the dreams right on a plate and give them the dreams they didn't know that they maybe even had the ability to get.
Awesome. Kind of like the job, right? You didn't even know you could get it. And if so, do you think you'd still be doing anything in art, or like what do you think you'd be doing if you weren't doing the events industry jazz that we all do today?
I mean, ideally, I would have stumbled upon that like odd relative that had my trust fund waiting for me, and I'd just go to parties. I'd probably be, I don't know, I also looked, I was an editor in an art magazine for a little bit in college as well. So something like that, like kind of, again, like still that line of, I think my brain is geared towards the curation portion of things. And so kind of doing content like that with art or interactive entertainment of some kinds. Like I like installation pieces. So maybe being like, we have so much great installation art in Phoenix, and the more I learn, the more I'm like, oh, that's maybe where I would be. But I mean, ideally the trust fund.
Cool. I think that's all. I think all of us are changing our answer as we speak. I love it. Erin, all right. Last but not least, you got to tell everyone the story of how you got involved with Visit Charlotte.
Okay, well, I got into this industry in 2003 via an extremely random job. I thought that I wanted to teach little children when I was in college, and I was an overnight laundry attendant at a Hampton Inn, which is obviously a trend here. Yeah, make it Hampton. So I moved from northeastern North Carolina slowly across the state, and eventually made it to Charlotte in 2009. And I was working for two great Hilton properties here, and an opportunity came open at Visit Charlotte. And I came from a very small town that their CVB was very minimal and was more of a visitor center. So I really wasn't familiar with what they did. And I realized that I would now have these resources to be able to sell outside of these four walls. And I now could know everything that was going on in my town and be able to be really excited about all of the new development and the things that people can experience while they're there as an event attendee that they didn't know about. And so that's the funnest thing. And I've been doing that now since 2010. And I just love the experiences. Awesome.
And what would you be doing if you weren't in the events industry, or, you know, in and doing this? Because I mean, you definitely, as Andy and Tressa, have tons of experience. What would you be doing instead?
As much as I love this, my biggest passion is singing, and that's something that I've done my entire life. I am actually in a little band that plays in Charlotte on my downtime. But it's just something that I've done my entire life. My family is extremely musical, so I really kind of wish that we'd gone down the Partridge family line, so we could have, you know, maybe not a trust fund, but some other pocket there so that I could fall back on that. But it didn't happen. It's not too late, but that's absolutely second dream job if I could do that.
I mean, we were having a dance off to start this episode. Maybe we should have been having a sing off. I definitely would have lost, though. Andy is so straight faced right now. He's ready to sing. He's ready to go.
Oh, I was like, oh, I'll sing right now.
Awesome. Let's throw down.
Well, let's jump right on into this topic, because there's a lot of questions that we have, and I know the audience is going to have a ton of questions. We're talking about how do we bring this local flair, and not like a cheesy local flair, to your event. Obviously, we have the city represented, we have the local person curating it, and then we have even technology that you can use to curate these experiences. But before we even get into that, I want to know from all of you, why do you think there's a bigger demand for us to have a more local experience? Whereas, you know, years ago, people were like, let's do this random theme. But we're now, more and more often, we're talking on my end, on the AV side, they're saying, how can we design a scenic piece that incorporates, you know, Austin, or, you know, Charlottesville, or, you know, Phoenix? Why do you think this demand has started to happen? And let's kick it off with Erin. So you must hear this all the time when they're coming into the city.
Absolutely. There are so many events out there, and there is so much noise around them. And as so many different organizations and associations fight for the maximum attendance anywhere they go, they need something that is different, because we have this new generation of travelers that are, millennials. We can talk about it all day, but they really are the new generation of travel, and they want different things. And they really, I think people in general are much more traveled than they used to be. And so to be able to compare different destinations and experiences and make someone really want to go to whatever that event is, being able to give them something local that they wouldn't be able to experience somewhere else is just extremely unique. And that's something that you can't really give a value to that. And I think that is really one of the biggest reasons why people have pushed for that, because there's competition almost in anywhere that you look when it comes to trying to get an attendee. So you just have to try to maximize your resources.
Do you find that when you're for lack of a better term, competing against other CVBs in cities, when people are looking at multiple cities, do you find that you're pushing the local element of Charlotte more than you are pushing, number of beds or something like that?
Absolutely, because after a while, all the hotels are the same, and attendees really don't spend that much time in their hotel room. So, what they're looking for is something that they can also turn into potentially a vacation while they're there. They may want to bring friends or family, a significant other, and so because of that, they want to be able to do the two birds with one stone thing, and they want to be able to experience more than just whatever the content for that meeting is. And so we have to focus more on what the city can offer with the experience, because every city has hotels. And so after a while, that becomes all the same to people other than the costs. So that definitely really plays into it.
Awesome. I love it. Tressa, why do you think that people are beginning to ask for more hyper-local experiences when it comes to the events and when they're coming to Arizona, for example?
I think that Arizona's always been, it's definitely growing, but it's always been a destination-y destination. Like, everybody has an idea of what Arizona is. And so it's always funny when they come and they say what it is. I'm like, okay, not really. But sometimes, it's just what pop culture and everything has made it to be. And so when they're here, you want to give them that. They're like, I'm going to Arizona. And so, I don't personally know very many cowboys, but that's what they think they're going to get when they get here. And so you have to at least put that in. Like, you have to give them the thing that makes them excited to talk about it, because we're all kind of living live now. Everything, with the Snapchat stories, with Instagram stories, like Facebook live videos, like everything. Your entire day you could share with everyone all the time. And so if you're going somewhere, a hotel can be beautiful and it can be awesome, but the exciting part of your day is not sleeping in a comfortable bed, for other people, for sharing that. So you have to kind of give them experiences that make other people, envious of where they are, because everybody's sharing because they want people to know what they're doing, keep them updated, but also be like, don't you wish that, this is the experience I get to have today? Because the world's getting so small with technology that you have to kind of compete with oh yeah, but we have that here, or I could go do that there. You have to show that you're somewhere interesting, that this is something great. There's a reason we chose this. There's a reason this conference is happening. And so I think that that's why people want more and more authenticity, so they can talk about it as experts too when they go home as well.
Awesome. I think it's so interesting to bring up that FOMO idea that people want to share, show a picture to show that they're at this cool place. And it's all about getting that Instagram photo, right? To show that you're doing someplace different, and obviously bringing a local flair to that allows you to really differentiate that picture than just, oh, I'm in front of a brick wall. It could be anywhere, right? Oh no, I'm in front of, Horseshoe Bend, for example. I love it. Andy, so why do you think that apps like TripScout have started to really become so laser focused and so popular amongst event attendees and people going to different cities? Why do people care so much about getting that local flair?
Well, I think it sort of goes back to some of the things you just said. We have a term for this, and we call it post-anticipation. And it used to be that when you study how people trip plan, they're actually happier before the trip. They're happier when they're anticipating. And now it's this idea, as we say, you're post-anticipating. It's after the trip, I'm posting, I'm getting feedback, and when you're traveling now, there's an expectation that you're going to come back with stories. You're going to come back with recommendations. You're going to come back with value. And what that's done, and I talk to travelers all day long. That is really all I do. We hear of just the commoditization of things like hotels. And if you look at like, like my Instagram and where I'm going to spend my dollars, like I'll stay in a hostel so I can afford to eat at a Michelin star restaurant. And it's like, unless the hotel is epic or interesting, it's a commodity at this point. So, people are looking to apps, like TripScout, to actually make sure that they can go to places, that are actually going to give them experiences they want, but like give them that street cred as a real explorer. Something that we're literally putting into the app right now for all of our cities is a filter that's called like do it for the Insta. And it's like literally you can see here are the spots. We just did this for Washington, D.C. this week, where it's like, if you want to get a badass Instagram shot, like here's where to go and here's how to do it. So I think when you're designing, experiences for meetings, like, to satisfy that urge doesn't need to be hard or complicated. You just need to think about what's actually going to, take what they're looking for at the end of the trip, and make them feel the way they want to feel.
Totally. And I think that idea of them anticipating more and wanting, they're happier at the beginning of the trip, it puts a lot of pressure on everyone, right? But I think,
Totally.
like you said, there are definitely some ways to fulfill that end, and I think that's where we should jump right on into. So I want to start talking about like, ideas and things that people can consider when they're trying to bring a local flair to their event. For example, is there a tip that you have or something that you always make sure that they do, whether it's local to what you do or you think it could be spread across multiple cities? What do you think are some easy wins that planners can take advantage of when it comes to bringing local flair to their event? So Andy, I'm going to kick it right back over to you. What are some things that, you guys are always looking for when you're putting them into your trips, that you always say like, hey, this is always a win. People always want to do this. People are dying to do this. People should definitely go to this kind of thing across all cities.
Yeah, so we're working right now in a huge overhaul for Washington, D.C. And I lived in D.C. for almost my entire life. And like writing this guide has made me fall in love with D.C. again, because I just realized how many awesome things are here. And the litmus test that I use is, imagine that your attendee or your traveler is leaving, they're at the airport, they're on their way home. They should think back to each one of those moments and just be like, damn, that was awesome. And the reality is that it just needs to surprise you. So like when I think about the things that make cities great, I think about what's the expectation that somebody had coming into the city to begin with, and how do you break or surpass that expectation? So in Washington, D.C., just like, for example, like you can go to H Street Northeast and you can go to H Street Country Club, which has an indoor mini golf course. If you live in D.C. and you've been there twice, you might not need to go again. But as a traveler, your mind's going to be blown. So I think even just having a couple of these curated recommendations that show just like how you can have a great time here, that sets enough of a stage where now, they know what to do. Like they have some good recommendations. They want to leave the convention center in downtown area. So help them do that, shine a bright path for them, and let them go have an experience that they want to have anyway.
Epic. All right, Erin, what about you? What do you think are some, things that you've seen be really, really successful for your clients that have come in to Charlotte? What sort of activities, what sort of, places to go? What do you recommend?
Well, Charlotte we're in this really cool kind of renaissance where we have so much development that's happening that a lot of people are still learning about us and being introduced to us. So we're taking advantage of that. And we have so many people that if they are familiar with Charlotte, most of the time they think of us being the second but banking financial center, but they don't necessarily think of us as a hotspot for millennials or to go for a really cool convention. And what a lot of people don't realize that we have is we have the U.S. National Whitewater Center, which is only like 15 minutes outside of our downtown area. And it's been used as an Olympic training center. It's over 700 acres of just this beautiful adventure park. And people don't realize that they can go just 10 minutes away from the convention center and they can be in this beautiful, just outside park. And we have these, one of the things that I think people need to consider when they go to any city is trying to find, even if it's going to be a venue or a museum, is finding something there that you're not going to see in another city. And so another thing that we have is the NASCAR Hall of Fame. And that is not something that you need to be a NASCAR fan to enjoy. It's super fun. You can do the simulator rides and you can do the pit crew challenge. And those are the types of things where you would not be able to do that anywhere else. But it's something, to Andy's point, is that it's a surprise and it's not something that you would expect to see. And so people that go there just always have such a great time, and it's not something they consider doing before.
Awesome. Very cool. And last but not least, Tressa, can you explain, I mean, pivoting from activities maybe more to design as well, since you do a lot of design. What are some easy wins that people can make when it comes to designing their event? Beyond just putting a cowboy hat in the middle of the table. I'm just going to use that as an example all day long. What would you recommend are some easy wins that people can have for incorporating some local flair to their event?
Well, especially in Arizona, it is everybody's bummed if they can't be outside. That's why you come here. I mean, it's gorgeous almost every month of the year. We have that hot summer, everybody whines about it, blah, 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 but it's gorgeous every other month, so it's fine. And it's that moment to be outside to see these things. Like, I've grown up here, so there was a time in my life where I was a little jaded to, I mean, we have saguaro cactuses everywhere. And I was like, yeah, I mean, but they're cactus, like they're everywhere. But here, I mean, if you're not from here, then you haven't seen them before. Like, they're such a special part of Arizona. And so just to be around the nature and like just enhancing those elements alone. So if you can have just a beautiful dinner outside and you light your cactus, you show off the desert. And then also, I think being a local here and being a local anywhere, to bring those things that you love about where you live to the event, like things that people might not be able to experience easily, like on a conference trip. Like maybe they can't actually drive out to the middle of nowhere and sit and wait for it to rain or look at the stars. But I like to try to think of ways to bring those in even just a little bit, like those little things like the smells and the sounds, those things that you don't get unless you are a local and you know them. And it's to give guests that experience that they can go back with. And it might not even be a tangible, like, oh, yes, I remember this great smell. That's why I had a great time in Phoenix. But not really. But they leave and they have more of a feeling like, no, I was in the desert. I felt that I was there. And they had great experience and more of a connection to create that. So to bring those kind of design elements in, even if it's on the resort property.
Awesome. I think the part of the smell and bring the things that they don't have time to go get is very, very interesting. I mean, you mentioned the smell. Like people don't know, like in Arizona, when it rains, there's like certain flower bush. I forget what it is. You probably know better than me.
Creosote bush.
Yeah, it activates and it smells totally different in Arizona when it rains. So next time you're in Phoenix, come and check out the rain. But it's definitely, I think, trying to figure out a way to bring that to people because while it does smell amazing, it only rains very rarely in Phoenix. So how can you do that? I love it.
Shout out to Phoenix General Store, who has started harvesting the creosote bushes in bundles that you can hang in your car and house. And when it gets really hot and damp, then they activate and they will smell like rain. So I walked in one day and was like, you guys are the best.
That's awesome.
That is cool.
I'm probably going to hang one of those in my bathroom so every time I take a shower, it smells like rain.
Yes. That's what I do.
I love it. I love it. All right. So now to the flip side. So those are some easy wins that people can have. But what about when people make a big mistake? Like what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people make when they decide to try to bring that authentic local experience? So I'm going to kick this off. Let's go with Erin. Erin's ready to go with an answer on this one. What are some big mistakes that people make when trying to create that authentic experience?
I think that sometimes going too quickly to what you think the automatic theme for your event should be. When you have a CVB who often, if not almost always, partners with their local DMOs, you have endless resources for trying to incorporate local things without it being too sticky. And so, for example, to use the NASCAR example, there are a lot of really fun and classy ways that you can incorporate that without necessarily having to get cheesy and having checkered flag tablecloths and trying to get Champ the Cheetah in a big fire suit running around your event. And those things can be really fun depending on what your attendees are. But I think just we get so busy in our day-to-day trying to come up with really cool ideas, and then a lot of times don't necessarily have the time to really flesh those out. And so too often we kind of go to the basics of, well, they have NASCAR there, so let's get a driver. And sometimes that's not necessarily going to work for your budget or for your attendees and the actual event that you're trying to have.
So if someone were to do an event in Charlotte, what would be your alternative theme to go away from doing NASCAR?
Well, not to make us seem like we're all a bunch of lushes, but we are kind of currently one of the microbrewery capitals, if you will. There are no less than 37 in Charlotte. And so that is something that when it comes to Charlotte, we're kind of a newer city. And so our identity is a little bit all over the place, really, with what it has to offer in a good way. But that's one of those things that a lot of people are, when you think of food and beverage and trying to incorporate the locality of the event, that is something that is so easy to incorporate. And, for example, moonshine is something that is very popular because that's one of the reasons why NASCAR got started. So you can kind of do these little connections without it necessarily being in your face. And then they learn something about the city and then have another unique experience.
Very cool. Very cool. What about you, Andy? What are some of the biggest mistakes people make when they're kind of planning out their trip and the different experiences that they should have around a city or around a state?
Yeah, and actually, Hans, I want to touch on something real quick because the original question you had was like mistakes and being authentic, and I actually think there's like an important thing here, and that's don't try too hard, because if you're trying too hard, you're not being authentic. So like, do the things that you do well, let it be exactly what it is, and don't make it like sticky and cheesy and like rub the appropriated thing that your city is known for in everybody's face. Like my rule would be like, take advantage of, like all the senses, like what should you smell, what should you taste, what should you hear, what should you see, like hit on each one of those elements. And then you've sort of given people an immersive experience. On travel, it's one of those things, I'll go back to the A word, and that's authentic. Like, I always think about like authentically, my life in DC is pretty boring. So I don't know if like authentic is actually really the right term. I think what you want to do is just figure out what makes it special, but without necessarily being obvious. So like, think about what makes you, you people leave your city and be like, oh, I really feel like I understand Charlotte a bit more now, or I have an appreciation for why people who live in Charlotte stay in Charlotte. And I think when you walk away from a trip from something like that, like you get equal parts of like, I saw something great, but like I have a fondness for that place that makes me want to return. And I think for the events industry in particular, like we're bringing people to your city for some sort of purpose, but ideally we want them to come back. We want them to know there's things to do here besides go to a meeting or go to an event. So I think you can just balance those couple of things and you have people leave with the right opinion and the right understanding of who you are in the first place.
Amazing. I think you nailed it, nail on the head for sure. Tressa, what do you think? Like what mistakes do people make when bringing the authentic experience to their event?
I think that sometimes they get stuck in what they've seen as authentic for, the era or the period that they're going for. Like a lot of times like, oh, we want a cowboy rustic. And so then at the end of the day, if you don't bring in new elements, if you don't bring in modern things that people are engaging with in a real life way, then it's going to look dated and it's not going to be interesting anymore. Like, I mean, you can go to, I don't know, I feel like you could go anywhere and just have like a cowboy party just for the sake of it. And there's a difference between coming to Phoenix, which is actually, compared to the rest of the cities in the US, it's a new city. And so we're not old, we're not dated. And there's a way to still bring that culture in without being like, oh no, but we need to have a red checker linen and we should have the cowboy hat and that will be the party and that will be great. I'm like, I mean, not quite. Like it'll be good. It will always be good because you're here and it's beautiful. But there's that disconnect of kitschy and dated as opposed to like that looks like a modern fun way to be a cowboy,
Awesome. I definitely am down to not seeing more checkered linens in my life. So this is a question that I kind of just making up now off the top of my head that like I'm really curious to know. So obviously you guys are very knowledgeable in this, but someone say like they're planning an event in a new city. Let's say they've never even been to it. Maybe they've gone to the site visit, what sort of team should be assembled to provide this sort of authentic experience? Are there certain people that should get involved? For example, do you need someone who's lived there their entire life, so then that way what is good and what's bad and where are the good places to eat? Or can you get away with not having anyone who's ever been there before? So, Andy, I want to kind of talk a little bit about how you guys assemble your team that provides these experiences on TripScout. Where do you guys get this information? Who are your kind of like go-tos that you think you have?
So we've built a really interesting network of locals in all the cities that we cover, and also people that are just really, really heavy travelers, and they've been all over the world, and they have troves of recommendations. And the reality is, I think the best resource you can possibly do, if you have no experience in that city whatsoever, I mean, think about it how you would plan a trip if you want to have a great time yourself. So like, go online, read some blogs, find people that actually, know that city, and actually you can tell that they know the content. And honestly, just reach out to them. Just be like, we're putting an event in this city, and we want to make sure that people have really the right understanding, the right experience of wherever we're going. Like, you tell me. And honestly, it's like for so many of those people, they'll gladly do it just for some basic co-marketing. But if you want to get in the mind of sort of a blogger, like, you're pretty much lending back to them that they have some authority in that space, and they will gladly give you recommendations. And we rely on that stuff all the time, and we get all the good stuff. Like, people are happy to go rep their hometown.
Awesome. I mean, I'm definitely happy to rep Phoenix for sure. Speaking of Phoenix, Tressa, obviously you work for a destination management company.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like a destination management company is required for someone to be able to know what resources to be brought in? And if not, what other resources should someone be brought in, or maybe additional companies that could be brought in to making a great team?
I mean, I feel like everyone should hire us, but I know that sometimes there's, budgets and different kind of content meetings that you might not need a full managing destination management company for. But I agree. It's like getting in touch with someone who is from here, and or just like looking at even local magazines. I find that I'm always looking at them. I have a subscription to a ton of them, and I still feel like I don't know one half of the things that are going on in the state because there's so much happening all the time. But it's a great place to start and to look. Like, there's Modern Luxury magazine. It has lots of different cities that they're in, and it's kind of cool to see the elite things that are going on. And then from there, you can kind of still keep gauging, being like, okay, so that's apparently the best thing. What else can I do that's in that strain? And I think that's a good way to start. And then, yeah, if you make friends with any kind of local, people really do love to talk about being here. But you should always think about hello too.
I love it. Not promoting at all.
Yeah.
Erin, a lot of times people come to you first and are looking for that team of people that can help them produce their next event or move their next meeting here. What kind of teams do you usually assemble? Do you recommend someone reaching out to their CVB? How does that work with you guys?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, we work with so many different types of meeting planners, and some of them they're volunteers and they don't even work for that organization. And some of them have absolutely no planning experience whatsoever. And so we work with all levels of people that have different expertise as far as event planning. And so, CVBs in general are funded by city taxes. So all of our services are completely complimentary to our planners. And the best way to explain what we do is to consider us as an extension of a meeting planner's team. We become your team. We are the people that are on the ground that would also work with someone like Tressa's team as well, if they were working it together, because the resources that we have you do have people that live here. We have a number of people that have lived here their entire lives and have really been able to see the cool history within the city. But what we really try to focus on is being able to provide the resources that you would not just find in a Google search, or something that you could be able to call all of your resources, but we try to make it so that you don't have to spend a lot of time looking for those resources, because we try to go ahead and have them for people. Because our whole goal is just to try to bring people to Charlotte and make sure that their attendees do have a great time from start to finish, and that they do want to come back and have that experience to take back. And in addition to that, they're able to, I think that they really, using resources that you have that you can find anywhere, such as Andy's, you can find the cool neighborhoods that you didn't know about, that you would not see as a convention attendee. You can actually get on there and just find the cool bars, the dives, the speakeasies. You can find all of the things that you wouldn't necessarily find just as a meeting planner. And so I think when you kind of put all of those resources together, you've got a treasure trove of options.
Cool. Very cool. Well, we're starting to get some questions in from the audience, so I want to kind of go into a little bit of rapid fire because we have a lot of questions and very little time. So we have some very specific questions, and I usually try to keep the questions to everyone, but we do have some people-specific questions. So feel free if you guys have anything you want to add on to what these awesome what your awesome panelists have to say, feel free to. But let's just start with Andy. So Andy, obviously, I think we were talking a little bit before the show that technically TripScout doesn't have a sort of like element where you're connecting us to an event or incorporate us to your event app, but maybe coming soon. But how can people incorporate tours into their events beyond just the typical bus tour, hey, let's hop on this and go stop to stop to stop? Can you talk a little bit about ideas that you have for someone to incorporate something like TripScout or, creating their own kind of, guided tour for their event?
Yeah, so first off, we would love to have your event use TripScout. And one of the things that we can do is actually set up a promo code where, all of your event attendees can then download the TripScout guide for free. And we can also do some neat things like put in event-specific content or other things that are sponsored. So always happy to chat about that. I mean, I think beyond that, it's like the classic like hop on, hop off piece. I think at that point, if you haven't been to a city before and you're there for a short amount of time, like fine. I think that does have its place. If you're going to try to bring more things into the event itself, like go ahead and set up one of your events last night that is not convenient to where the event is. It will take more work. Like you'll have to go arrange transportation. You'll have to shuttle people to and from a different part of the city. But the reality is like, one, then you're going to be in contact with your attendees for more of the night. You've created their entertainment and they're going to follow you. And then two, they're just going to get more out of it. So it's one of those things where it definitely takes more work. But I think that level of curation is something that's really, really appreciated. And in reality, I think it's going to let people leaving with just a better, appreciation for the city and for the event.
Awesome. I love it. I like that idea too of still offering that experience, but it not costing you anything to do it as well. Like you said, like if it was really far away, like let's say, for example, someone in Arizona wanted to go to Sedona. It's too far away for you to do it and do it inexpensively. But if you can offer that resource for them to figure out how to get there and everything like that, you still allow that experience to happen, but aren't necessarily taking on that fixed cost. So I love that.
And I think one more thing to throw on there is like so many people now are starting to, take their work travel and add some personal days into it. So, if that's sort of a common reason or thing that people are doing with the event, help them with their before or after time as well. Like come up with itineraries, come up with other resources that they can use, like support them through the entire trip as opposed to just a couple days where they're your attendee.
Preach. I love it. That's so fantastic. Tressa, we're getting some people. Obviously, people are starting to figure out that we're both from Arizona, so they're starting to ask Arizona specific questions. People want to know, like maybe, and they can probably figure out a way to incorporate this also, I think, in other cities as well. But what are some of your like go-to recommendations that you think that people should have if they're planning an event in Arizona and never been here, or they're bringing attendees who have never been here before? What sort of recommendations would you have for them?
For their, I guess more specifically, like for if they're just coming to Phoenix in general, or
let's say they're hosting, they're hoping a corporate event, a conference here, and then bringing a bunch of their employees down to Phoenix. So we'll keep it more group specific.
Okay. I would definitely recommend giving them that chance to explore the desert here, whether it be through tours, like if you take a Jeep tour or a Hummer tour, like those things they sound like, we drive around in a Jeep, but it is the coolest thing. You get to see the desert and you get to learn about it. All the guides are so knowledgeable and amazing here. They are so passionate about it. And then you can also, I think that it's always a great idea to steamroll that kind of the momentum of being on the tour, being on the activity, and taking that to your event that night, whether the tour and takes you and you end up in the desert, and that's where your party is. Like, I just think it's one of those great dramatic moments that you can have in somewhere that's just open land and amazing mountains. Like, you can just drive, you don't see it yet, and then you get there and there's a gorgeous party under the stars. And I think it incorporates everything about seeing the city, getting local flavors, bringing in other, like, we have great restaurants to bring that out, but to bring everything out to the desert, because we're in the desert, we're like a network building out from it. And so it's always fun to bring it all together in one place and enjoy that.
Well,
so I'd recommend doing that.
Well, I think it goes back to what Andy said too about surprise. And if you're taking people to a place they weren't expecting to go to, they think, oh, the desert's dangerous or whatever it may be, and realize that it's actually very beautiful, or maybe it's boring, but realize how beautiful it is. You know, that again brings into the surprise that Andy was talking about. So I love it. And Erin, so I think we've done I feel like 83 episodes. I feel like we've almost talked about everything, it feels like, at this point. But for people out there that aren't very familiar with a CVB, how do you recommend engaging with the CVB and the benefits of going with the CVB to kind of kickstart the conversation?
First of all, just holler. Just call us. What we do is try to answer the questions that you don't even know you have. So what I would say to anybody that wants information on Charlotte, whether you're just coming there as a friend or a visitor to an event attendee, is that we have the resources to make things available that you would have to do a lot of research on your own to find out. And so, when it comes to what a CVB is helpful for, is we are not there just to send information to hotels, because again, that's something that at the end of the day is very important, but is not your biggest focus. And so we work with planners all the way from finding a venue for their event and helping them come up with ideas and themes, all the way to giving working with them up until the day of and the execution of the event. And so we have staff that are on site that actually help with things like if you have people that are coming in that want to do tours, if that's if you need off-site venues, if you're looking for local musicians, if you want to do that unique flair. For example, I had a client recently that wanted a unique venue, and we get asked for this a lot, but a lot of times people just end up going to a museum because something has prohibited them from doing something that's truly unique. And we had a client that said, I want something different that I am not going to find anywhere else. And so I got to go on this really fun trek with my coworkers in trying to unearth this new thing. And we found out that there was this prison in North Charlotte that just closed in actually 2011 that was back from the late 1800s, that is now it's called Southern Grace Distilleries, and it is a whiskey distillery, and you can go in there and you can get your mugshot taken and you can get pictures taken behind bars, and they do tours and events, and it's just this really fun thing that, again, you're not going to find somewhere else. But that's not something that you would have found if you just went to whatcanifindinCharlotte.com. And so, I think the thing that just people should understand about a CVB is that wherever they are, their job is to help you enhance anything that you want to do in that destination, regardless of whether or not it's putting an event together or just asking for a recommendation, or maybe you just want to know what's going on in that town during that time. We really are kind of a one-stop shop for any types of resources. There's really not a yes or no type of thing. You ask, we give it to you.
Well, I want to go to that distillery now, so that sounds awesome.
That's
come on down.
That's going in the TripScout Charlotte guide for sure. I was like scrolling through trying to see if we already had it. I was like, okay, that's how we get our stuff. Is we listen on podcasts and say, oh, that sounds much cooler. Let's add that.
There you go. It's Event Icons first right there. All right, awesome. Well, this one's going to be a tough question, I think, for all of you guys, because I think that it kind of hits a little bit at the controversy of virtual reality and augmented reality, that now, I'm sure the same conversation happened when the internet was starting to happen, but, nowadays people can literally go on and see pictures of things, they see it on their Instagram, but soon people will be able to feel like they're in a local place. So how would you guys recommend basically creating a new experience that can't just be recreated digitally? For example, as much as I love Arizona and looking under the stars, let's say, for example, eventually I can put on VR headset, look up, and I feel like I'm under the stars. How would you recommend going beyond that, though, and creating a new experience that can't be created digitally, and what the future of events looks like when there is a day and age where people can experience what it looks like remotely? So Let's go with Andy, the tech guy, to start off with. How would you guys stay ahead of that when it comes to TripScout?
I wrestle with this all the time. And it's one of those things where on one end, I think like AR and VR is a great way of making the world much more open to everybody, whether you can be there or not. But two, I think the reality is there's no replacement to going. Like there is no smell-o-vision yet. Like, honestly, I haven't been to Phoenix, and literally right now I want to go when it rains. And I think, I think a lot of this is like telling the story of like the VR and the AR should be the appetizer. Like that should be what gets us excited, but there is no smell-o-vision, and I don't think they're making that anytime soon. So for me, it's one of those things, and this is like maybe a little bit contrary, but I'm very anti-tech for the sake of tech. Like if the tech is going to enhance that experience, then use the technology. But if it's not adding anything, like, we're past the time where everybody's making an app because you think you have to make an app. Like don't do VR or AR for the sake of VR or AR because it's the cool thing. Like make sure it matters. But I think a lot of the reason why events and meetings are important is because like that human connection is irreplaceable. So I think it can be a great marketing piece, but when people are there, like have them be there, have people be present and mindful. And I think it also, I'm not really in the events industry, but I also think that's maybe like something where I would take that bull by the horns and be like, there's a place for this, but like, no, let's get people to see each other in person and still try to be a little bit human.
Awesome.
A little bit.
Awesome. Tressa, what kind of your thoughts on that, on the importance of, creating a local flair when it can be done digitally?
I think that you can see pictures and it can be great. I don't think you can have a local flair quite digitally all the way because it's that moment of being somewhere with other people and sharing it, like having a shared worthy moment, even if it ends up being like maybe the first motivation was for the Instagram post, but I mean, in reality, you've still got the picture because you did the activity, you did the thing, you went to the place and you were there with other people. So even if it is just of you, but you had to ask someone else to take the picture for you, you're there. It's not a screenshot. It's not just a faraway, distant idea. You got to be there and experience it. And it's a moment that when I'm building an event, I like to think about those times, like not just a photo op, but an experience that gives them a takeaway. It gives them an exclusive experience too. So it's not just about, oh, we went on that tour. We went on that tour. We got this really interesting information. We have this great keepsake to keep. We got this beautiful photo and we had this dinner, and it's like everything all in one. So it's not that they just have to piece together a collage of pictures, it's that they had it all in one thing that they can feel even when they leave. And I don't know how VR could replace that. You could get a sense, but it's not the same.
Cool. Well, it seems like Tressa is not worried at all, so that's fantastic to hear. Erin, what are your kind of thoughts in this digital world, how we continue to create these great experiences?
I think that it's becoming really difficult for event planners to try to keep up with what the technology is, how to use it, and what really is appealing to people. And I think it's really interesting because on my side, the amount of planners that I work with, we work with a lot of people who they have an association that regardless of what the segment is, they have boomers that are aging out and they have millennials that they're trying to get in. And that's something that we hear constantly is that a membership in general is waning, and it's typically them trying to get the younger generations in, and it's how do we do that? And that's when you start to hear this technology conversation really continue. And I think it's kind of a fine line because there are a number of really great digital ways of having a meeting, but it's not always connecting with people. And sometimes I think that we have planners that don't necessarily consider the cost of doing some of those things. And if it really, to Andy's point, does it add value to what the meeting is actually about? And is it something that's actually enhancing their experience, or is it really just the new shiny technology out there? So I don't know that I have a solution for it, but I would say that in general, I think it's a really great way to enhance a meeting, but I definitely don't think that it will ever really replace the ability to be somewhere and to really have them experience that area in a way that they would if they were physically there.
Awesome.
Well, I'm reconsidering some of what I said earlier. So Mark Zuckerberg just did an interesting sort of keynote about virtual reality. And Facebook's goal is to get 1 billion people around the world onboarded to a virtual reality project. I don't know over what time period. But the reality is that if that is successful, there's just going to be less events. And the reality is, it's just like there's less business travel now because we can get on video chat and accomplish what we need to accomplish. The utility of being together for an event is going to go way down. So the experience needs to go way up. And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, like the meeting is like the meeting, like wink and nudge. But the reality is you're there for the travel, you're there for the event, you're there to go like have drinks and socialize with friends, partners, or other people. So I would probably start planning ahead and realizing that just because like having to go is not going to be a selling point for too much longer. It really has to be the thing that people crave and desire. And it's not now. I don't know if that's next year, 5 years, or 10 years from now, but I'm confident that will be true to some degree at some point.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Well, I think you make a great segue into some really great advice, and I think that's just an amazing tip for event planners is that, less about the utility, more about the experience. So I want to kind of start to wrap up the show because Will's been a very bad host and might make us go over time by like 2 minutes. But I do want to end with our last two questions that we always ask, which is, first of all, what is your one tip that you would have for event planners when planning their next event? So Andy just dropped some great knowledge. We'll come back to you so you get a bonus tip from Andy. But let's go back over to Erin. And Erin, what would be your one tip that you would give event planners when starting to plan your next event?
Well, I feel like this might be an easy answer, but you need to call your local CVB.
Okay. Keep going.
You need to, it's one of those things where we have all of these resources out there, but look at the ideas that you'll get. And I think something to understand too is that, when you're working with different cities, you can get ideas for other cities. It's not all about that one destination because we do all know each other and we all work together. And then we work with awesome DMCs as well. So it's just this constant cycle of resources out there. And so if you start with the local entities, you are going to have a successful event without fail.
Very cool. All right, Tressa, you don't get to say call a DMC. So what would be your one tip that you'd have for event planners when planning their next event?
I think that for event planners planning their next event, for designers doing their next event, for everybody thinking about the next event in general, is to stop for 1 second and think about the attendee. I think we say a lot that we're thinking about them, but I think we're also thinking of what we want or what we should want or what this destination should give us. And I think that sometimes it falls on the wayside that this isn't just for a photo or for a write-up later or for the write-up in the first place. It's people are going to be there. Like they're going to be there experiencing your art, your work, your talents and your organization. And so it's kind of to take that into consideration when you're thinking of all those elements from the onset. When you start thinking that way, then I think that all the way through your clients will be happier, your attendees will be happier, and you'll leave a better imprint of your city on people's minds as well.
Deep. Awesome. All right, Andy. So you get a bonus tip. So what would be your one tip for event planners going into their next planning for their next event?
Yeah, I'll just touch on something I said earlier is think about proactively what people should do to experience your city if they're coming early or if they're staying late, and like be part of that experience. Send them to other parts of the city, help sort of curate or facilitate. You don't need to, actually lead it. But make sure that people leave having sort of a full view of the city and everything it has to offer. And, I think it's a shame to only be part of half the trip when there's lots more going on around you.
I love it. All right. So I'm hoping that I can still finish strong with a little bit of time that we have left. But this is down to my favorite part of the whole show, which is sharing favorite resources. And I know these guys are chock full of amazing resources. Obviously, they are resource houses in themselves. So I want to jump right on into everyone's favorite resources, whether they're books or blogs or, maybe your favorite new podcast or whatever it may be. Obviously, Event Icons is your new favorite podcast. But beyond that, let's jump right on in. So Tressa, I know you got a ton of them. So you want to share all of your favorite resources with the audience?
Right off the bat. So there is, where'd it go? I'm trying to like look back at my list of what I said. I read a great book. It was called Phoenix 21st Century City, but it's part of the Booth Cliburn editions they go to different cities and tour all of their pop culture, their architecture books. It's just really great, pull out quotes and interesting information. Abstract the Art of Design on Netflix, Ways of Curating is a book. Robert Dunsmore, I got to meet him at an ILEA conference, and his idea of doing one new thing every time is amazing. And so go check out his articles and all that. So I think I hit them all.
Cool, perfect. And for everyone who's tuning in for the first time, we post all these in the show notes on our website. So you just head over to the blog right after the show, and these will all be there for you to be able to click, copy, paste, add to your Amazon cart, all that jazz. Add to your Netflix binges. All right, Erin, what sort of resources do you have for the audience that they should be definitely checking out?
Well, I'm a huge podcast fan, and one of the most recent ones that I just started enjoying about travel is Extra Pack of Peanuts. And I know it sounds silly, but it is just a really funny kind of deep dive into not only cool new places to travel, but then different things that you can experience while you're there. And I know that this might be a little old-fashioned, but I also love industry newsletters because there are just so many resources out there, and we have to stay current in what we do and how we work with each other and what we can offer to event planners. And so things like that just really help you, especially when you can see what other destinations and how other events are happening, because it just makes us all more well-rounded.
Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. All right, Andy, I know you got a ton of resources, and I know you also had a good resource that you wanted to share with the audience if they're interested in checking out TripScout. So I'll let you share all the awesome resources that you have.
Oh, well, that's awesome because it makes my shameless plug less shameless. So if you want to check out TripScout, you can use the promo code Event Icons to check out one of our guides for free. And also, too, if you're interested in using that for their event, please send me an email, andy@tripscout.co. My favorite new tool that I'm like really fascinated with and kind of obsessed with is this great company called Travel Bank. And they have an awesome tool that just helps, with like receipts and expense management. But the really neat thing that they're doing, I think this is great too for any like event and travel managers on the corporate side, is they've created this really clever way to effectively reward employees for making good travel decisions budget-wise. So they've pretty much created this great program to kind of keep your corporate travel costs reasonable and low while empowering your employees to just make the right decision. They're brilliant. I think they're going to change how companies manage their business travel. It's against Travel Bank.
Awesome. Wow, that sounds cool. I think I'm going to have to figure out a way to implement that for sure, too, because I think that's something every company needs for sure.
Yeah, it's good.
I have one cool resource, and then these guys are all going to laugh at me, but for those who don't know, I actually made the switch from Mac to Windows, and I'm now rocking a Surface Pro, and I wanted to recommend to everybody out there to check out the Surface Pro line if you haven't yet. If you use Mac and you live and die by it, I literally have lived and died by it for years, but was looking for a new form factor when being on events, and I used it over this last week at a very massive week-long event we were doing, and it was so awesome to be able to pull up, take notes, be able to pull up my quotes and my diagrams right in my arm, literally like a tablet, but have the powerfulness of a computer. Powerfulness, that's a great word. I definitely recommend check out the Microsoft Surface Pro, great computer. Yes, I will keep you guys updated with the world of Windows. But the good news is I hosted an entire episode of Event Icons and my computer didn't crash. Wow, I don't know why I said that then at the end. But we are all out of time, everyone. This has been an amazing episode. I literally learned so much. I literally was taking notes during the entire time of all the cool things. I'm going to rewatch this one for sure on iTunes. Really, really exciting, amazing episode. Before we sign off, though, and I thank our awesome guests, for those who are watching right now, we have some really exciting news to kind of share, and we'll be sharing some more stuff next week on next week's episode. But make sure you guys tune in next week because we're actually switching platforms from GoToWebinar over to Zoom. There should be an email going out to all of you very shortly. And what's great about this is we're bringing back the audience chat, which means that you, the audience, gets to chat with each other. So exciting. Hooray. This goes all the way back to the Blab days. I know you guys missed it. We're finally making that switch. What's also great is we're going to be doing some simulcasting of Facebook Live and YouTube Live, so stay tuned next week. In next week's episode, while I don't usually talk about next week's episode, we're doing our favorite events, and we're having all the hosts, yes, all of us, I don't know how we got us all in one place at once, talking about our favorite top 3 events. So it'll be a great one to check out. The new platform, great new episode format, and some big changes coming to Event Icons, so stay tuned. But that's enough for me talking about myself. A huge thank you to Erin, Tressa, and Andy. You guys are so amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show. This was absolutely amazing, talking about how to bring local flair to your event. And just again, thank you guys so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of Event Icons. To catch the transcription and all of the resources mentioned, head to www.helloendless.com/blog. This week's episode will be posted and available by next Tuesday. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway and join the Twitter conversation sponsored by Alex Plaxton and Little Bird Told Media. Just tag your post with #EventIcons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on #EventIcons.